and welcome today to the International Women's Day 2021. This is the African Interest Group of the American Society of International Law. I'm a co-chair as well as my colleague Mohammed. Hello. So today we'll be talking about International Women's Day with the theme, Let's Choose to Challenge. The way it's going to work is the keynote speaker speaks for 15 minutes. Every other speaker speaks for 10 minutes. Then we'll open up for a Q&A session where the participants can actually send in their questions to the Q&A box. So feel free to send in your questions while the discussions are ongoing. So what do we mean by let's choose to challenge? As women, there are a couple of things women have achieved over the years, and things seem to be getting much better. We all watched the inauguration of the first female Vice President of America. That was a good start, as well as the first WTO Director General, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. These are all milestones within the sisterhood, which we all want to acknowledge and obviously celebrate. So today as International Women's Day with the theme, Let's Choose to Challenge. What is it all about? It's all about challenging the stereotypes, the biases, able to celebrate our successes as women, what we've achieved in our different spheres of endeavor, whether it's the legal sector, the academic sector, whatever it is, about celebrating our achievements as women, doing what we have to do, and obviously changing the landscape of the workspace. In boardrooms and organizations around the world, business leaders are tuning into the reality of inclusive practices because it makes sense, it makes business sense, and it's also the right thing to do. Gone are the days when men were the only people seen as the arbiters of achievement. Right now, women are able to work in different spheres of life, changing this narrative, breaking barriers, are doing so many things, all because they've given the opportunity. And women are all saying it's all about they want it to base on meritocracy, not because of gender, not because I'm a woman, but because I deserve, based on my abilities, my skills, my qualification. So today, the International Women's Day, we're here to celebrate women's achievements, discuss the challenges women face in different spheres of endeavor. To start off, will be our keynote speaker, Professor Emilia Onyema. Professor Emilia Onyema is a professor of international commercial law at SOAS, University of London. SOAS is School of Oriental and Oriental Studies, University of London, where she teaches international commercial arbitration and international investment law. She's qualified to practice law in Nigeria, as well as the Solicitor of England and Wales. She's also a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and an independent arbitrator. She convenes the SOAS Arbitration in Africa Conference Series and leads the SOAS Arbitration in Africa Survey Research Project. The 2020 survey report on the top African arbitral centers and seats was published on the 30th June 2020. Her research interests focus on development of international arbitration in Africa and engagement of Africans in international arbitration. It further interrogates the intersections of the discourses on diversity and ethnicity with particular reference to Africa in international arbitration. She's also a member of various professional associations, including the Nigerian Bar Association and International Bar Association. She convenes the SOAS Arbitration in Africa Conference Series and publishes the Arbitration in Africa Survey and co-author of the African Promise. She has published widely on arbitration-related issues. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Professor Emilia Onyema. Her topic is Challenging the Prevailing Gender Status Quo, Each Individual's Role. Professor Emilia Onyema, please.
Ijoma, thank you so very much for the kind introduction. Welcome, colleagues, to this event, and thank you very much to the Africa Interest Group of the American Society of International Law. Today is the International Women's Day, so congratulations and happy celebrations to all the ladies. And this year's theme is on Let's Choose to Challenge. My topic draws from the theme, and I've chosen to explore challenging the gendered status quo in international arbitration, examining each individual's role. In giving this keynote, I want to explore two questions. The first one is whether there is a gendered imbalance in the appointment of arbitrators in international, commercial, and investment arbitration. The second question then becomes, how can each individual contribute to this change within our community? So a couple of caveats. Today, it's true that today is International Women's Day, but if you look at me, I have different levels of diversity. So I'm going to engage with intersectionality of diversity with gender as an element of that. The second caveat is that as it relates to the topic and the focus of my topic, which is the appointment of arbitrators, we're talking about experienced and skilled individuals. So I'm not asking for women to just be appointed. Onyema has just mentioned that, just because we're women, but because we are actually qualified and we have the relevant expertise to be appointed. So I'll move to my first question, which is whether there is a gendered imbalance in the appointment of arbitrators in international, commercial, and investment arbitration. I'd like to just step back a little to 2017. In 2017, BCLP released their survey report on arbitration survey, diversity on arbitration panels. 84% of their respondents thought that we have too many men on arbitral panels. That shouldn't come as a surprise, but at least we have data to back that up. And 50% of their respondents thought that there should be gender balance on panels of qualified candidates with necessary expertise and experience. 100% of the respondents agreed that all participants in arbitration should contribute to this desired change. And that's where I'm going to really latch onto the last of those findings. So to answer my first question, I decided to look at some statistics. And pulling some data, I looked at ICSID, LCIA, AAA ICDR, and Cairo Regional Center and Singapore International Arbitration Center. ICSID, which is the premier arbitration institution for international investment related disputes, in 2019, just 2019, appointed 192 individuals as arbitrators, conciliators, and ad hoc committee members. 81% of these 192 individuals were men. Only 19% were women. Now let's turn to LCIA, which prides itself as a leader in gender diversity and last year won the GAR Diversity Award. In their 2019 statistics, in their report for 2019, LCIA said they appointed 163 females out of 566 individuals that were appointed as arbitrators. And this represented 29% of all arbitrator appointments. The AAA ICDR does not provide stats on just females, but on diversity, on their diverse group, which includes ethnic minorities. And for them, 30% of arbitrators on their business-to-business cases were diverse members, so women and ethnic minorities. Let's move to Africa. In the Cairo Regional Center, which is one of the premier arbitration centers on the continent, and that has also administered over 1,400 cases since its inception, in the third quarter of 2020, so a few months back, had appointed 34 arbitrators, and only 2 were females. Now let's move to Asia, to the premier arbitration center in Asia, Singapore International Arbitration Center. SIAC reported that in 2019, SIAC itself appointed 159 individuals as arbitrators, and 58 were female, representing 36.5%. Now, these numbers speak for themselves. We can see that there is a huge imbalance in the numbers of male arbitrators appointed vis-a-vis female arbitrators across the board. And so this data effectively confirms to us what we all already know, that in the appointment of arbitrators who determine international commercial and investment disputes, there is a major gendered imbalance between male and female arbitrators. And so that leads me to then consider that in our community, we know that we do have a problem with gender imbalance. We also are aware that this imbalance is not for lack of quality, or that we do not have female arbitrators who are qualified to sit on panels. So I'll just refer you back to that 2017 report. And so the key question then becomes, having recognized as a community, so the international arbitration community, that we do have a major problem here and a major gap, what are the initiatives that have been taken? So I'm just going to mention 3, but there's so many more than 3. So the 3 I would mention, and one of the most popular ones is the ERA Pledge, the Equal Representation in Arbitration Pledge, which was published in 2015. And the idea behind the pledge is for people to sign up to improve the profile, representation, appointment of female arbitrators. And we can say that since the launch of the pledge, we have seen incremental movement with many more females being appointed as arbitrators. And this data we can pull from institutions that publish such statistics. As at yesterday, the 7th of March, the ERA Pledge has been signed by 4,562 individuals. The ERA Pledge, the committee, the strategic committee are looking to getting states to sign up to that, to the pledge as well. The second one in which I am personally involved, which is the African Promise, which also draws from the ERA Pledge, and its focus is wider than gender because it also looks at geographic inclusion, particularly the Africans, was launched in September 2019. And again, it focuses on improving the profile and representation of African arbitrators and their appointment in international arbitration. As of yesterday, we had 328 signatories. With all of these signatures, we still have not been able to change the narrative or to see a major impact of changes in the constitution of international arbitration tribunals. And this led to just January this year, 2021, the Racial Equality for Arbitration Lawyers launched, again, to try and make arbitration more inclusive. And so the key question, or for me, this would lead me to conclude that the remedial measures through the use of pledges and promises provide awareness of the problem. And this has led us to, on every conference and webinar or training session, there's something on diversity. There is something on inclusivity. And so it becomes an issue that is relevant and on the agenda. So we continue to talk about it, which is a good thing. But since 2015, so that's almost 6 years ago, we're still launching new inclusivity ideas. And so for me, my conclusion is that these measures, they are contributing, but we have to acknowledge that they have not led to any major rebalancing of the, gender rebalancing of those appointed onto arbitration panels. And so, which is what our community, what we need to see. It's not a question of what we want to see. It is what we need to see. And so the issue of inclusion has almost become one of those things that you list on conference on conference programs. And my view is that that's not good enough. It needs to change. And so, what to the focal point of my keynote, the question then becomes, if all of these pledges and promises are not leading to the desired change, what else can we do? And I think that it's time for us to begin to look a little bit more inwards. And so for me, what I have discussed so far is that it remains a major problem of lack of inclusion within the international arbitration community. And the members of the international arbitration community themselves, we all recognize this, and we all acknowledge that there is a problem, which is why we have all of these various remedial initiatives, which I agree have recorded some successes, but it's still a major problem that we do not have any major change to the appointment of diverse tribunals. I have also shown, for me, the research that BCLP did shows that it's not a question of lack of supply. We do have experienced and skilled female arbitrators, but it's more of demand. And so for me, it is important that we now begin to move to what else can we do. So I would want to quickly, before my time runs out, make 4 suggestions. The first one is as appointers. If you have an opportunity to nominate individuals for appointment in whatever capacity, who do you populate your list with? Is it all men that you include on your list? Do you include only women on your list? Do you have other individuals from other ethnic and generational groups? So today, can you commit to yourself to change your practice? The second question is, do you support younger colleagues? Because that is what we deal with the pipeline problem. And so the question then becomes, how do you support younger colleagues if you do? Do you mentor younger colleagues? If you do not, can you today commit to actively seek out diverse members of our community to mentor and support? If you already mentor younger colleagues, can you just quickly do a mental check of the gender and nationalities of your mentees? Are these diverse groups? If they're not, can you commit to yourself to diversify your mentee groups? The third thing is when you have opportunity to organize conferences, workshops, webinars. Who are your panelists and keynote speakers? Do you actively seek out male and female speakers? If not, can you commit to ensuring that all your panels will always include men, women, younger practitioners, will be diverse? The fourth one, when you have an opportunity to recommend names for any role in arbitration, whether as experts, tribunal secretary, any role, can you commit to ensuring that your list will be diverse and more inclusive? And these are questions, they're individual, because it takes each one of us. That's what BCLP concluded. 100% of their respondents said it comes down to each individual. So if we can make individual commitments, commit to yourself that you will become more inclusive in your own activities, in your own contribution to the community, that might just begin to move us forward. So in conclusion, My urgent call to our community is that desiring change is not enough. We all say we desire it, but desiring it is not enough. And it is not for others to bring about this change. It is for each of us within our sphere of influence. And as we have opportunities under any role relevant to arbitration, to act inclusively. So again, a very happy International Women's Day to all the ladies in the room, and many thanks to the ASIL for this invitation. Thank you. Onyema, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Thanks for that. That was a very good one. We have lots of questions for you. We'll throw them during the Q&A session, but lots of things to think about. Most importantly, you said the support of younger colleagues. That is so important. Thank you once again for that. Going forward, we have the following. We're going to go in this order. The next speaker will be Ms. Ck Hoffler, followed by Ms. Simone Bowman, followed by Ms. Tafitza Paci. I'm so sorry if I mispronounce it. Please bear with me, please. Correct me, please. The next
just call her Taffy. That's fine. We call her Taffy, and that's fine.
Taffy, okay. The next followed by Ms. Chinasa Owana. Then lastly, the only male speaker in the panel, Dr. Courtney Griffiths, QC. So the next speaker will be introduced by my colleague, Professor Mohammed Halal.
Thank you, EJ. And so our next speaker is Trisha Ck Hoffler. She's the CEO of the Ck Hoffler firm, which is an Atlanta-based law firm that specializes in representing plaintiffs in a whole range of maybe tort-related and other forms of litigation, including trucking accidents, medical malpractice, wrongful death, catastrophic personal injury, civil rights litigation, commercial litigation, employment discrimination, opioid litigation, and global commercial transactions. So it's an incredible array of practice areas. She is licensed to practice in the states of Georgia, Florida, Virginia, the District of Columbia, and Pennsylvania. She has an incredibly diverse set of skills and talents that she brings to practice. She speaks French fluently and is proficient in Spanish and Portuguese. She's also served as counsel to the civil rights icon, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and has represented him and the Rainbow Push and related organizations for the past 30 years. She lectures extensively on trial strategies and trial techniques throughout the United States and elsewhere. She has extensive professional experience throughout Africa, Europe, and the Caribbean. She's represented foreign interests and foreign governments and lobbied on behalf of various foreign countries while in practice in Washington, D.C. She's developed new privatization practice for her firm in foreign markets and manages the general representation of diverse local, national, and international corporations and foreign governments. She has also furnished advice and counsel to various African nations, including Angola, Guinea, Gabon, and has been involved in developing election procedures and policies and helped coordinate non-governmental organization participation in elections. She's been educated in Switzerland, in Collège de Le Mans, and the University of Geneva, in Canada and the United States, and she is a graduate of the Georgetown University Law Center and Smith Center. So it really is quite a privilege and a pleasure to have with us Ms. Ck Hoffler, Trisha Hoffler. Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Muhammad, for that introduction. Ms. Onyema as well. Thank you for inviting me to this incredible panel. It is such an honor for me to bring, and I'll make them as brief as I can, remarks to the American Society of International Law, but on this panel, on this day, as we celebrate the accomplishments internationally on the International Day of Women. I am president of the National Bar Association. I am the 14th woman in our almost 100-year history to be president of the National Bar Association, 14th woman. I am chair of the board of Rainbow Push Coalition, the first woman to serve in that capacity. And I say that not to say that I'm great, but just to illustrate that we have a struggle ahead of us. You know, we talk about equality and equity, whether, as Miss Emilia said, in mediation and arbitration, whether in our everyday practice, whether in politics, whether in our everyday lives. I like to use the Portuguese expression, a luta continua, vitória é certa. And what does that mean for those of you who don't know that expression? The struggle continues if you are a woman, a Black woman in the diaspora. And when I say diaspora, that's whether you're in the United States, whether you're in Senegal, whether you're in Zimbabwe, whether you're in London, whether you're in Paris, a luta continua. But the other side of that is what I love. Vitória é certa, victory is certain. So today, on my theme, on this great day where we celebrate the history of women and the International Women's Day movement, I would call it, it is Black women in the diaspora refuse to be denied. Refuse to be denied. So what do I mean by that? Well, when you refuse to be denied, you refuse to be treated, and we're lawyers, we're jurists, we're judges. We are in many countries at the top of our profession, but we should refuse to be treated as second-class citizens, diminished, overlooked, berated, oppressed, and beat down in our professional capacities. Because if you on this panel and in this conference have not experienced what it is to be treated as a second-class citizen because of your gender, you haven't lived long enough. I mean, I've been a lawyer for 34 years. I tell people I'm 37, but if we just do the math, we know I cannot be 37, but I feel 37. But, you know, I can remember when I was 6 years old in Versoix, which is a small town outside of Geneva, being pointed at and being called a monkey. That was in 1968. I guess hypothetically, I have to admit that I was born in the 60s. Being called a monkey. And that's where my journey began, where I can remember. And I am African-American, and so I was born in the United States, but I was educated elsewhere. But my journey, where I can, as far back as I can remember, a feeling like what we call here in the United States, the other, meaning you're not mainstream. People consider you like the other, something else, a second class, whatever, but you're not the primary focus or focal point of power, of law, of society, of politics. That's called the other, the other. And that experience when I was 6 marked me, because immediately I understood, and in the US, they were burning cities in the late 60s because of racial inequities. Dr. King was assassinated in the late 60s. You see, so we were experiencing racial strife in the United States, and yet I was in Europe being called a monkey. So we have come a long way, but we have so far to go. Being a lawyer and being professionals, there's one thing that I always say that no one can take away from us, and that is the voice to speak truth to power. I always say, if you want to silence a movement or a lawyer or a professional, take away their ability to speak. But as long as we can speak, we can push for equality. So let's talk about, just briefly, what does the International Women's Day mean in the diaspora? Because it means different things to different people. We celebrate the accomplishments, yes, of women internationally, and I look at women of color. If I look at this panel, we celebrate your accomplishments, what you mean to this world. But I can tell you that if you trace back the history of International Women's Day in the United States, and some say it started here, so I'm going to trace it back. That's what the literature says, that technically it started here in the US. It's traced back to the turn of the century, the 1900s, when women, mostly white women, went on strike and demanded equal pay, equal treatment, equal working conditions in the 1900s. But they excluded Black women. So, you know, there's only part of the story being told when we think about the history of the international, where we've come today. Because in the inception, it was really just a movement of one segment of women in the United States. And then European feminists around 1911 on March 8th also joined in. There was a meeting in Copenhagen where they talked about, feminist issues, equal pay, and people not having the right to live and to have proper working conditions equal to those of men. And so roughly in 1911, that's when we saw pretty much an international dynamic, but women of color were left behind. They were not really included in that discussion. So, but that didn't stop Black feminists who fought for equality and who fought for solidarity across racial and gender lines throughout the world. That didn't stop them. It's just they weren't part of the mainstream discussion when it came to International Women's Day. We know in the United States in the turn of the century, in 1896, Black activists such as Mary Churchill Terrell, Harriet Tubman, we hear about Harriet Tubman, there's a movie, Ida B. Wells, they formed the National Association of Women of Color. That was the first vehicle in the United States where you saw Black women activists fighting for equal rights, similar to what what was happening on an international basis. 1920, we saw that evolving. 1930s, we saw greater advocacy. And then we saw people being involved in the communist movement. And as you know, just based on history, if you're in the United States and talking about the fact that if you have been labeled a communist in the 30s, you were blackballed. So Black women, many of them were blackballed for fighting for equality because they were perceived to be communists. And then in the 1950s and 60s, even though women had the right to vote, technically in the United States, Black women and women of color did not have the right to vote, and to the passage of the Voting Rights Act. I say this because I think we need to know our history to understand better what we're celebrating, and as Emilia has indicated in her comments, where we need to go. So so that's why I'm just raising these sort of ironic historical issues to get us to present day. In this country, Black women earn 60 cents on average of every dollar less than white men earn. And white women earn 79 cents less. So there's still a pay equity gap. That's huge. That's huge. And while today we celebrate the first vice president of the United States, who is African American, and we celebrate that, we revere that, and there certainly has been progress made. Where I sit as president of the largest predominantly African American bar actually in the world, we have 66,000 lawyers that are predominantly African American. I can tell you that the statistics of how Black women live in this country, those statistics are dismal. Even though our vice president is an African-American woman, but it's better than it was. So when I look at the diaspora, and based on the research and statistics that I've looked at as well, because I grew up overseas and came to the US for education only for college, and then for the rest of my education, and have lived here since then. But when I look at the statistics around the world, and I look at this in the context of celebrating the progress that we've made as international women, they're probably worse than the statistics that I quoted here in the United States. So where does that leave us? We are here in this country and around the world. You all stand in solidarity with us as we watched with disgust, dismay, and just fear in many respects in this country, the death of George Floyd. When we heard about what happened to Breonna Taylor, a Black woman, Sandra Bland, that lets us know here, and you know as well, that the struggle for equity continues, because even in death, women are treated worse. Even in incarceration, women are treated worse. Certainly that doesn't take away, ladies and gentlemen, from the great feminists, some people would call, of our times. We look at Celia Cruz. People know Celia Cruz and they think, oh, she was just an entertainer. She was a Cuban salsa singer. Oh, no. She was someone who fought for equality. She stood up to, and I take no position. I'm not anti-Fidel Castro. I'm not taking that position, but she stood up against Fidel Castro's government and said no. And she was banished from Cuba. We can look at Miriam Akeba, South Africa. We call her Mama Africa when we celebrate here. She, for us, was a civil rights icon. She is a civil rights icon for us. When she fought for the abolishment of the apartheid regime, we were protesting here in the United States, And I was in law school at the time at Georgetown and praying that I didn't get arrested because they were arresting people for protesting in front of the South African embassy. But it was the combined efforts in the diaspora of leaders like Jesse Jackson, like Randall Robinson, like so many that fought for apartheid, that regime, to be destroyed and for Nelson Mandela to be free. But we watched in the diaspora those women who also fought for that, and we stood in solidarity with them. Even Iman, who's known as a beauty icon, Somalian model, she's a civil rights icon. She broke through barriers in that industry. We've got to give credit where credit is due. Oprah, people talk about Oprah. One of the first Black women billionaires. Now, I do know that on the continent, there are some Black women who are billionaires. That I do know. But in our country, Oprah Winfrey, breaking down barriers. Angelique Kidjo, from Benin, a singer. She also, through music and entertainment, we're able to break down barriers. Because a lot of times, what we see as the entertainers who are revered by people, including politicians and structures, they're able to make progress where we may not be able to make. But as those of us who are in the legal community, we have the voice of change. Because unlike every other profession, we are the only profession that can go into court and make a difference through law. We can change the law, even through the legislatures. If we're not, as a lawyer, many of the lawyers in our country, in Congress and the Senate, US Senate and Congress, as you probably saw if you watched some of these incredibly, to me, difficult proceedings to watch. When we looked at the impeachment proceedings, when we looked at the travesty, the failed coup d'etat on January 6th in the United States, when a group of terrorists, we got to call it what it is, tried to take over the US Capitol. We watched that in horror because there are these people in our backyard. We're living every single day with people who feel that way. But in the international community, you all may have looked at that in a different way. I call it a coup d'etat. It was just a failed coup d'etat, but they almost succeeded. And that's scary because we have to think of what the ramifications are and would have been if that had been a successful coup d'etat for the world economy. So when I look at the areas of solidarity in the diaspora, and when we celebrate the International Women's Day, as women, we stand in solidarity when it comes to police brutality. Police brutality has always been one of the great areas of shame in this country. But of course, I know that there's police brutality against Black and brown people in London and Paris and all over the world. It's not unique to the US. It's probably more pronounced because our civil rights movement emanates from us being beaten because we want to have the right to vote or be considered a human being, because we were not considered human, after all, in this country for many, many years. So COVID-19, what we see here is the disproportionate impact on Black and brown people and women in particular, So as we celebrate the accomplishments for International Women's Day, let's remember how there's so many of us that are still suffering in our various countries. Voter suppression. I did have the pleasure of being part of a group of consultants to the Gabonese government and to the government of Guinea-Conakry in the 90s when they had their first elections, democratic elections. And I did have a chance to see and witness some of the beauty and the evolution of that. It was new. I also had the benefit of participating in what I perceived was one of the greatest travesties that this country, the United States, has seen, which was the voter suppression that we experienced in the presidential elections and then the runoff elections in Georgia. What I witnessed in Gabon and Guinea-Conakry paled, wasn't even in the same category as what I saw here. We in the United States need to take a page from other countries, developing countries as we call them here, and how to conduct our elections, because we saw just devastating amounts of voter suppression, but the people said we're still going to vote, even in COVID, because of the grassroots effort, because of people making sure that people can get to the polls, even during COVID, the worst pandemic that has ever hit this country. So what are my takeaways as I conclude? One, As I said, we have got to remember as women, as we celebrate each other in the diaspora, in solidarity, that a luta continua, Victoria es certa. We are stronger together than we are apart, because indeed we have more in common than we have that separates us. We have to continue to meet and act in unison. You know, what happens in Dakar happens in New York. The way women are treated in one place with some variations is the same way women are treated in other places. I had the pleasure of doing some work in Angola many, many years ago, and in other countries on the continent, where according to the law, if a woman left her husband, she had no right to her children. You see, that is what we must change in every single country. That may not be the law now in Angola, but it was then. It may not be the law in a lot of countries in the world, but it is in a lot of countries. So we have to stand in solidarity and identify these issues that are causing women to remain in an oppressed state. You don't have rights to your children. If you're being abused by your husband, if you're being beaten every day, and you fear for your life every single day, you can't leave because you will have to leave your children. We have to address that, ladies and gentlemen. And we have to commit to change in the practice of law. I think Ms. Emilia talked about mentoring. We must mentor young lawyers, men and women. Start at elementary school, high school, before they get to college. Mentor someone, we must, and show them that it's possible. So many people, children, live in despair, thinking that they don't have any options because they don't have role models. They may hear of role models, but unless we go out in our communities and are role models and stop talking the talk from an intellectual standpoint and go and actually touch someone, then we're not making a difference. We have to stand in solidarity internationally, as we are, when we see police brutalities. I'm proud to say, but it's sad to say, that every single case that you all see internationally of police brutality in the US is being handled by members of my bar association. Ben Crump is a past president of the National Bar Association. Lanita Baker is a vice president of the National Bar Association. Chris Stewart is a past president of one of our affiliate chapters in Atlanta, Georgia. Lee Merritt is an active member of the National Bar Association. And I can go on and on and on and on. They're making a difference with police brutality. And we want to stand in solidarity so we can also make a difference internationally, because this is an international problem. The UN indeed has stood there are many US commissions that have stood in solidarity with what's happening in the US because it's mirrored elsewhere. So finally, we need to have more conferences like the one that we're having right now, where we sit and talk to each other and share how we can help each other. Because as I said, we here can learn from what people are doing in every country, because we had one of the most interesting presidential elections and runoff elections in the Georgia Senate that I ever could have dreamed of. So clearly in this country, the most powerful country, some people would say, on the universe, need help and guidance from other countries who have a better track record and have perfected some of these issues that we struggle with. So on that note, I say thank you again for inviting me here to just share a few words. It's an honor when I see my sisters and brothers in the diaspora. It warms my heart because I know that we're making progress. Because let me tell you, in 1987, when I got out of law school, there was no such convening like this. There wasn't. It just didn't exist. And so we are making progress. We will continue to make progress. And as we celebrate the women who stand at the forefront of that, we must tell them thank you, because we stand on their shoulders. And without them, we couldn't be. So we must thank you, and I thank all of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, CK. I like what you just said. We should thank the women that have been there before us because we stand on their shoulders. That's so good. That's a good way to conclude your talk. That's very good. Thank you once again. The next speaker is Simone Bowman. Simone Bowman is a UK practicing barrister and cross-border mediator. She's also admitted to the bars of Jamaica, Guyana, Barbados, and the Eastern Caribbean. Ms. Bowman founded Bow Law Barristers Chambers, a common law set in Chancery Lane, London in 2016. Having worked in legal practice as a solicitor for many years, Ms. Bowman Law Caribbean is based in Jamaica, was established shortly after what she's seen after having opened up her London office, and she's driven by she's driven by her dedication, having qualified in the UK and Caribbean. Ms. Bowman is dedicated to challenging the perceived barriers of women and tries to succeed by leading and building an innovative cross-border legal practice. She provides pragmatic legal advice and support to clients and peers. Settling disputes and advocating for justice is at the heart of everything she does. Ms. Bowman is dedicated to law, and she's a law tutor and is currently completing her postgraduate studies thesis titled Brexit and the Enforcement of Cross-Border Family Law Disputes. Ms. Bowman is the co-author of the published law journal article, Citizenship, Belonging and Justice, a legal review of the Windrush scandal, published by the European Law Reform 2020. Her title is The Role of Formidable Women Shaping Your Future Goals and Sisterhood. Thank you once again, Ms. Simon Bowman.
A very, very warm good afternoon to you all from sunny London. Onyema, thank you very much for the kind invitation, and James also. It's certainly an honor to be presenting and sharing this august panel. And Courtney Griffiths QC, I salute you. So, Onyema, when I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago, there were quite a few things that I wanted that International Women's Day conjures up for me, okay? And there's so much that I could talk about, my journey as a lawyer, my journey as a cross-border lawyer, my upbringing, so much. But I'm gonna try and tailor it as much as possible so that you can have a snippet into me. And so my parents, my mother, she's from Jamaica, beautiful island in the Caribbean, the largest English-speaking Caribbean island. And as a child going to Jamaica from age 6 onwards, I was always amazed by the women in the community. It seemed to me that it was the women, really and truly, who held things together. They were technically the women, the heads of the household in a way. And I always admired my grandmother's tenacity, always her strength, going to dig yam and drying the pimento seeds, absolutely amazing. And it was that dedication that has sown those seeds for my mother, who sojourned from Jamaica at the age of 17 to the unknown world of England, and having to deal with the racism, the discrimination as she embarked on her role as a registered nurse, a profession that she worked hard to achieve and retired very successfully as a top manager of a nursing home. So as a child growing up, I was quite fortunate to have parents who instilled education. Education was just at the forefront of my upbringing with my brother as well. And if you can imagine, in a girl's bedroom, you're given a poster that is laminated, a quote from Malcolm X. And the quote reads, "To educate a man is to educate an individual. To educate a woman is to educate and liberate a nation." So if you can imagine at the ages of 11, 12 at secondary school, I'm handed this laminate from my father. So my role models have always been my mum and my dad, who have instilled in me that anything is achievable. You can achieve anything. Being a woman should not be a hindrance. It's your strength. Embrace it. So when I was at secondary school and I was interviewed at age 17, Simone, what is your intention? What is it you'd like to be when you get older and, you know, study? What is it? And would you believe this article says, one day I'd like to be an international lawyer. That's what the newspaper article said. And when my mum shows me that newspaper article, I'm always emotional because I spoke it. Yeah, I spoke it. It was around me. It was just something that was empowered within me. So as I continued my journey and continued my undergrad studies, I was fortunate to visit the Old Bailey and observe a case that left such an indelible mark on me. That is what has made me a passionate advocate for women's rights, particularly women who have suffered from domestic abuse. So this was a case at the Central Criminal Court in England, in London, a place where Courtney Griffiths pretty much has frequented throughout his career to date. And I remember as a 19, 20-year-old visiting the Old Bailey in the public gallery with my student colleagues and observing this trial of a woman who had suffered domestic abuse and was on trial for killing her husband, a slow burn. And my perception of that courtroom, all men, male judge, male advocates. The jury, okay, they were mixed, but I was thinking more of who are the lawyers that I could see, who could I emulate? And that again was an impression for me 20 odd years ago. And it never left me, and I wanted to achieve, and I was constant. So the theme of that section of my speech is more about having people around you, surrounding you, who can guide you and just give you that instinct, just give you that protection, and to say to you, look, anything is achievable. Yeah. So those sowed the seeds for me to want to progress. I qualified as a solicitor, and then didn't feel satisfied with working in that environment, and I just wanted to advance my skill set and do more advocacy, and so said, so done. And the next segment of what I want to share with you, which the Admirable CK has mentioned, is that we face discrimination, and if we haven't faced an element of discrimination, have we ever lived as women, right? And so when I was called to the bar and I wanted to succeed in a particular chambers, I had my interview before a panel of barristers, and I was very excited. I had to prepare. I had to prepare like a scenario. Once that finished, I was asked a set of questions. And one of those questions, I kid you not, one of those questions was, how are you coping being a single mother? How are you coping? How are you coping being a single mother? So you can imagine the sound in the room, because you have a nudge from one of the colleagues that says, we weren't supposed to ask that question. So when I reflect back on that scenario, it's that scenario, that situation, that uncomfortable position, that is what spawned me. That is what gave me even more of a challenge to say, you know what? I don't need you. I can do bad all by myself. And so said, so done. And with the support of my family, I sojourned to Jamaica to law school. and became more acquainted with my family there. And I went to law school and I excelled. And now I can say wholeheartedly that, you know what, the experience that I had from that particular interview literally gave me all the strength that I needed to say, I don't need to be in this so-called formidable chambers. I can do it all by myself. And that's what I set out to do. So I cross-qualified, I practiced throughout the region, and it's an absolute joy and delight to be able to represent members of the diaspora, sitting right here in London and representing clients in St. Lucia, Jamaica, Barbados, wherever. It's an absolute true delight because I pushed that barrier. I hired my own barristers. I set up on my own. And it just gives me so much joy to be able to impart that information and that knowledge to you, whether you're a law student, a practitioner. We have to challenge ourselves. I chose to challenge. There's not much else I'm going to add to that, other than I wanted to just mention sisterhood before I finish with a quote from Sojourner Truth, freedom fighter. And I strongly believe in us as women and as sisters, that we have a camaraderie of women that surround us, because it's so important to be able to pick up the phone and say to your friend, you know, I have a situation, you know, what can I do, rather than dealing with things in isolation. And I feel as though I've had some missed opportunities where I could have reached out to females and just said, you know, look, I need some support here, because you just sometimes feel like you're just on your own and no one's going to want to listen to you or hear your cry. But I think it's important for us as women that we reach out to each other. We build those networks. And Onyema, we go back a good few years. But one thing I can say about her is that she has believed in me. There are certain cases that Onyema has passed my way. And sometimes I have to pinch myself. I'm thinking, me? But she's had that, she believes in me. She believed in me in those particular cases and said, Simone, I know you can do it. Just, there's nobody else. I'm gonna, you know, you are the person. And it's that push, that sisterhood that listen, it's important. Yeah, the women that you have surrounding you, whether it's aunts, you know, your colleagues, personal friends, support them, lift them up, lift as you climb, as you get up there, continue to lift. And so I want to just close in I'm just going to read a short excerpt from Sojourner Truth, who's an absolutely formidable person who, what can I say? I mean, I read her, when I first read her speech when I was age 14, it was absolutely incredible. She lived from 1797 to 1883, and she was an African-American abolitionist and also women's rights activist. And so she gave a speech entitled, Ain't I a Woman? Do Google it. It's an important speech. She delivered this speech in 1851 at a women's convention in Ohio. I'm just going to take some excerpts from it. That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. Ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could heed me. Ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. Ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most of them sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. Ain't I a woman? Then that little man in black there, he says, women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. Ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman? Thank you so much for listening.
Well, thank you, Simone. That was spectacular and definitely incredibly rousing. So thank you very much for that. So our next speaker is the one and only Fazba Paci Pandoya. She is simply spectacular. I think that would be the shortest and most succinct introduction for her, but I mean, she has an incredible background, an incredible career. She is a partner in Foley Hoag in the International Litigation and Arbitration Department, and she is the chair of its Africa practice. She represents sovereign states in a whole range of international disputes, including issues relating to natural resources, mining, human rights, the environment, the law of the sea, territorial boundaries, and I should also say the law of the non-navigational uses of international watercourses. She is a member of the team that helped the Gambia secure a provisional measures order from the International Court of Justice, instructing Myanmar to stop its genocide of the Rohingya. She's also recently helped Mauritius defeat an ICSID claim brought by the United Kingdom, by UK investors concerning the Le Morne UNESCO World Heritage Site commemorating resistance against slavery. She's also helped Uruguay defeat a $4 billion iron mining claim. For over a decade, she has represented sovereign states from all over the world in investor-state arbitrations concerning natural resources, mining, and many other fields. She has been named to Africa's 30 arbitration power list. I think she could be a list of her own, really. And she has been ranked as one of the top 100 female lawyers working in Latin American matters. She's the vice president of the African Society of International Law, a member of ASIL's executive council, and a co-chair of Blacks of ASIL task force. It is, of course, a distinct pleasure to have you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. That really generous introduction, and thank you to ASIL and especially Onyema for organizing this event. To both of you on behalf of the Africa Interest Group, I'm so pleased that we're taking this moment on this day to join this amazing, brilliant panel to share just thoughts on the topic of let's choose to challenge. In wondering what to focus on in my remarks today, I turned to my favorite author, Toni Morrison. I figured that she, as the first Black woman to win a Nobel Prize since it began in 1901, would know something about choosing to challenge. I found a speech of hers called Cinderella's Stepsisters. I think for better or for worse, the fairy tale of Cinderella is familiar to all of us in this call. But of course, it's about a girl whose mother dies and is mistreated and used as a servant by her malevolent stepmother when her remarries. Cinderella has two stepsisters who participate in making Cinderella's life miserable. They watch silently as their mom mistreats Cinderella as a slave, and they enjoy the benefits of Cinderella being the one to clean, cook for them, and help get ready for their fancy ball. Ultimately, through the intervention of a fairy godmother, Cinderella marries a prince and lives happily after. Toni Morrison writes that what is unsettling about the fairy tale is that it is essentially the story of a household, a world, if you please, of women gathered together and held together in order to abuse another woman. And she says this is not a wholly medieval problem. It's quite a contemporary one. Feminine power, when directed at other women, has historically been wielded in what has been described as a masculine manner. And she makes the point that as educated women, all of us have or will soon have both the economic and social status and the power of the stepsisters. And she tells us, do not participate in the oppression of your stepsisters. Oppression is a strong word, and I ask myself, are we as lawyers really capable of oppressing our sisters? Toni Morrison says, yes, we are. She says, we are the stepsisters, and we can choose to be complicit in a world in which women are not treated equally and not given equal opportunities. The inequalities and discrimination women face manifest themselves differently in our respective fields within international law. And as someone in the international arbitration field, I have to say that the inequalities in the appointment of women arbitrators are still striking despite the significant advances made. Emilia provided an extremely helpful summary of figures in 2019 across the world. And I just want to go a bit deeper into the figures of ICSID, which is the premier center that has been very helpful in sharing detailed statistics over time. The ICSID caseload statistics issued a few months ago show that since 1966 through June 2020, so in the last 54 years, claimants have appointed 29 women arbitrators, as opposed to 715 male ones. So they've been picking women less than 4% of the time. In comparison, women make up 20% of the appointments respondents have made over the last 54 years. And ICSID has made 11% of the appointments being women, and co-arbitrators, so the two arbitrators picking the president, they've picked a woman 9%. And so that was what was happening across the last 54 years. And then ICSID provided figures that show you what the status is over a year. Emilia pointed out all of the initiatives that have taken place. What's been the change in these respective parties and entities picking women? So it turns out that ICSID has improved. It went up from picking women 11% of the time to picking women 14% of the time. A slight improvement. Respondents have stayed the same. They were picking 20% of the time women over the last 54 years, and that's stayed the same. Claimants are getting worse. Over the last 54 years, they were picking women at 4% of the time, and now it's down to 2% in the last year. And as far as co-arbitrators picking a presidential arbitrator, they did not do that at all over the past year. Despite all the conferences, despite all the talk, they didn't appoint an arbitrator in an ICSID case over the last year. And I had a chance to see how that happens the other day. One of my colleagues circulated internally a list of 9 candidates for the presiding arbitrator that the 2 party-appointed arbitrators in his case had provided to the parties. The idea being for the parties to jointly select one of the 9 individuals they had listed to be the presiding arbitrator. And shockingly, not a single woman was listed as a possible presiding arbitrator. So I just asked myself, could they find no woman out of 9 that they were listing? Did the thought never cross their mind? And I wonder if it's time for parties to jointly require that party-appointed arbitrators include women in their lists of potential presiding arbitrators. Once the list has been provided, it's very hard to go back to them, but perhaps initially, as they're appointed, there should be a requirement that the parties say they must be gender parity in the list provided. Or can arbitral bodies require the same? Can we as women serving as counsel, parties, administrators insist on this, or will we stand by as women arbitrators continue to be sidelined? But there are more direct ways in which we women fail to look out for our stepsisters in our professional fields. Sometimes it is us who do not encourage the promotion of other women in careers. Sometimes it is us who refuse to give our women supervisors the same level of respect that we would give our male ones. Or we hold each other to double standards, accepting assertiveness in men as leadership while denouncing it as aggression that needs to be tamed when we see it in women. And sometimes it is us who refuse to speak highly of a peer or a more junior woman colleague for fear that if she succeeds, she will somehow dim our light or replace us. And sometimes it is us who bully our more junior female colleagues, refuse to respect them, to respond to them, to guide them, and instead push them to their physical and mental breaking points with unrealistic demands and deadlines so that we can shine when we have to submit that perfect pleading to the tribunal. Toni Morrison writes, "I'm alarmed by the violence that women do to one another. Professional violence, competitive violence, emotional violence. I'm alarmed by a growing absence of decency on the killing floor of professional women's worlds." That's pretty strong to speak of an absence of decency on the killing floor of professional women's worlds. And perhaps we think that's excessive for our own fields. But when you think of the number of women who have exited their legal fields on their way up, they just couldn't take it anymore. When you think of the extraordinary levels of depression and suicide in our field, at least in US law firms, one might wonder if indeed the language is apt. Those kinds of toxic work environments may have existed before most of us women came along, but that doesn't mean we have to maintain them. And Toni Morrison calls on us to choose to lead with a nurturing quality that comes so naturally to many of us when we're outside the work environment. We can choose to let our power emanate from that place that's nurturing and caring instead of one dominated by ambition. And I think if we have this, if we can tap into this nurturing power and we begin to have compassion for other women, we might choose to challenge the status quo a bit more, to do work that has not been done before, or to do old work in a new way, because we do have that power. We aren't helpless. We're not heartless. We can choose to challenge and make a difference to each other's lives in big ways and in small ways. And I'm grateful to just be here and sharing ideas with you and inspired by what Toni Morrison has to say, and just looking forward to hearing your views on some of these issues. Thank you so much.
Taffy, thanks for that. Thank you. I hope I'm allowed to call you Taffy. Thank you for that. Thanks once again. I like what she said about double standard. That's so true. The double. We'll talk about that during the Q&A session. Thanks for that once again. The next speaker is Chinasa Owana. Miss Chinasa Owana is a senior associate in the Intellectual Property Law, Technology, Media and Entertainment Practice Group of the Nigerian law firm Bowman and Igodalo. She has excellent experience in the field and has advised in numerous local as well as cross-border and multi-jurisdictional transactions involving brand registration, transfer, commercialization, protection, and enforcement, particularly in Nigeria and other African jurisdictions. She also advises business owners on regulatory issues with particular reference to the IP, intellectual property rights. In addition, her experience cuts across corporate and commercial law transactions. She's been consistently ranked as an expert in the field of intellectual property in Nigeria by Chambers Global Guide and more recently the World Trademark Review, WTR 1000. The World Intellectual Property IP Stars. Chinasa is an author as well as a regular speaker on intellectual property and ancillary issues. She's also an active member of many local and international IP associations, including the Pharmaceutical Trademarks Group. It's my pleasure to introduce Chinasa Owana. Her topic is Women Lifting Women in the Legal Profession. Chinasa Owana, please.
Thank you very much, Onyema, and hello, everybody. It's a pleasure indeed to be here today and be a part of the discussions this afternoon. Well, I would say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you are in at the moment. This is a very important discussion, and like Onyema said, I chose to take a slightly different angle, which is women lifting women in the legal profession. And in my opinion, it's only proper that on a day like this, the International Women's Day, when we're celebrating women of all ages, races, tribes, language, climate, and all that, that I should commence my talk with a quote by the first female Director General of the World Trade Organization, Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. She's also the first African to hold that office. And she said, I quote, investing in women is smart economics, and investing in girls, catching them upstream is even smarter economics. And of course, she's a living testament to that quote. But what does it mean to invest in women? My take on the subject means to give sufficient time, effort, not just finances and seeming opportunities, to ensure that women around you become their better selves. Whenever this issue of investing in women comes up, the first reaction is to look accusingly at the men. The men need to give women more opportunities. Men need to value the women in their lives, home, workplace, community, and recognize their equal rights, etc. While I absolutely agree that more needs to be done to bridge the apparent inequalities and challenges, to challenge the gender gap, I'm also of the view that a lot has been said and done in this regard. A lot will be said and done in this regard. We're not there yet. We're definitely not there yet, as some of the previous speakers have actually even shown, with stats and all that. It's a burning issue, but there's a growing consciousness, and gradually responsible individuals, governments, organizations, have begun to take deliberate steps in this regard. I like to use my firm as an instance. For instance, my firm Bowman, there's an even split between the men and women in the partnership. That was deliberately done. Not deliberately split into two, but there was a deliberate step taken to ensure that, merit wins at the end of the day. There are also a lot of other senior roles being occupied by women as meritocracy takes the front burner. For instance, the chief operating officer is a woman, the office administrator is a woman, the human resources officer is a woman, and so on and so forth. In fact, I'm of the view that by choosing to, raise families, to have careers, show up and do our work well, by pressing on irrespective of the obstacles all around, women actually challenge multiple biases every single day. So just like Professor Onyema said about looking inwards, and Ms. Hoffler, I hope I got that right, spoke about mentorship. I rather prefer to call on women, to urge them to lift other women up. We can talk about what the men are doing, to perpetuate inequalities and, extend the gender gap and all of that. But I think we also need to, look at ourselves and tell ourselves some home truths as well, and look at ways to build each other up, particularly in the legal profession where, we all belong. We need to take deliberate steps to invest in women, to mentor women, to challenge them, to challenge the so many myths that exist in the industry. I'm referring to so many myths about women in the legal profession. Some of these myths are being peddled, was still even believed by women themselves. No doubt everyone's experience is different, and there would always be some exceptions. But that is not sufficient to box the majority of women in one carton. I want to talk about maybe just one or two of these myths, 2 or 3, let me say, because of our time. And the first is that women make the worst bosses. The argument is, women are too territorial, women are too ambitious, or not even ambitious enough. They are not as knowledgeable as men, and so on and so forth. But this is not true, and it's high time we start, propagating this gospel that this is not true. Women make great bosses. In my career as a legal practitioner, I've been fortunate to work with both male and female bosses. And for me, the summary is that the issue is not with the gender per se, but with their leadership style and skill. It's not about whether the person is male or female. It's not about, it's not about that at all. It's about the leadership style and skill. In fact, in a study conducted by Leaning and McKinsey of women in the workplace, I think the study looked at 329 companies with about 13 million employees. It suggests, and I quote, "The barriers holding women back from equal power and influence in the workplace emerge much earlier than many corporate leaders believe." It's not about them becoming bad bosses or being bad at their role or whatever. All of these things start long before then, where women are pitched against each other, women are discriminated against, and make it look like you don't really know anything, you have to work doubly harder than the men, and so on and so forth. So by the time you're getting to be a boss, it looks like you've had to step on so many toes, you've had to fight so many battles and all that. And some women truly come out tougher than they ordinarily would be, but that doesn't still change the fact that a lot of these women are great bosses. As women in the workplace, we should also check our gender biases against fellow women in leadership roles or positions. Oftentimes, feedback or critique from a male boss is received better than the same feedback from a female boss, because women are generally expected to be likable, non-critical, and so when they give feedback, it's received poorly. Again, I've been privileged to build a strong team comprising both male and female. And the synergy, the energy, the passion in the team is proof that this is just a myth. Another important myth I want to just touch on quickly is that women do not help other women. Women care only about themselves. And you find this a lot in the legal profession. I've been privileged to attend so many, fora and all that. And when you're talking about this, women say, "Oh, women, my boss doesn't know what, she's a woman, she's not helping me to grow in my career." When I speak to men have this thing, they hang out together, they teach each other how to come to the table and all of that, but women just do their thing and that's it. Again, I beg to differ. I've been privileged to have been mentored by so many women. I've worked in 2-3 law firms before my present law firm, and I've had the privilege to work with some very, very top women in the legal profession in Nigeria who have shown an interest in my career, who have taught me, who have, basically held my hand along the way. And I've seen them doing that for so many other people. There are lots of mentoring programs and all that for young women. Again, a study conducted by Catalyst Europe of graduates of leading business schools in North America, Europe, and Asia. It was called The Promise of Future Leadership, Research Program on Highly Talented Employees in the Pipeline. It found that women are actually more likely to help other women advance in their career than men. In fact, 65% of women who receive career development support are now developing new talent compared to 56% of men, and I'm quoting. And 73% of the women developing new talent are developing women compared to only 30% of men. So it's a myth that women do not help other women. The final one I think I'll take because of our time is that women are too emotional. Women are too concerned about children and family, bring emotions into everything, and so on. And it's amazing that in spite of the long line of women who have made great strides in the legal profession, I just have to look around the room at the wonderful women on this panel, and many more out there. A lot of female legal practitioners are still being discriminated against on the basis of something so simple as emotions. Yes, women are said to be more emotional or expressive than men. While there's an entire conversation to be had about the place of emotions, in healthy reasoning, logical reasoning is not devoid of emotions. Regardless of your view on how emotional women are or can be, having and expressing emotions is not a bad thing in itself. It depends on how you choose to look at it, really. In my view, it's rather a strength, to be intuitive, to have high emotional intelligence, to be passionate about the work you do. In my firm, we say that passion drives us. Passion is an emotion. Without this emotion, it will be difficult to be sensitive, to have empathy in the workplace. And these are key things for the success of any organization. Yes, many women take care of the home front and are typically good at it, but it has never stopped them, nor has there been any remarkable difference in the lots of women with families and those without. This is buttressed by the study I earlier mentioned by Leaning and McKinsey, where it showed that there wasn't really any difference between women who had families and those that did not in terms of reaction to them in the workplace. In fact, many of the skills used by women on the home front are brought to the office every day in efficient conflict management, leadership, and time management, amongst others. Therefore, I choose to challenge women to lift up other women. I challenge us to look for ways to invest in the women around us. Women are not women's worst enemies. That is just not true and does not represent the millions of women who daily mentor others to grow and be the best that they can be. This should be a deliberate act to see what you can do to make the next lady to shine. So the question is there an opportunity that can showcase the strengths and good points of the lady you work with? Is there a training, a course, an event that will benefit the woman coming behind you? What are the teaching curves? What are the learning curves? What are those things that they should be aware of? How can you make that woman you live with, the woman you work with, become a better person? In short, how can you lift the next woman up? And with that, I will end this talk with a quote by Kamala Harris, the first female vice president of the United States of America, who is also the highest ranking female official in US history, the first African American, the first Asian American vice president. That's a lot of firsts. Well, her quote is, "If we do not lift up women and families, everyone will fall short." Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. Thank you very much. That was thank you very much. That was spectacular. So our final speaker is Dr. Courtney Griffiths, and I'll start just introducing him by just reading to you some of the testimonials about his practice and about his impact on the law. One quote says, "He is one of the most influential people in British law, a sensitive jury performer, a very powerful advocate who is eminently likable, hugely talented, and someone who excels across a wide variety of different cases, charismatic with juries, and holds their attention throughout." And so it really is our distinct pleasure to have with us Dr. Courtney Griffiths. He has been involved in some of the most high-profile and notable cases over the past 2 decades, including wide-ranging practice in domestic and international criminal law. Of course, we all recall his work in the landmark case defending former president of Liberia, Charles Taylor, including his cross-examination of supermodel Naomi Campbell, in which the London Evening Standard called under the headline, "Forget Naomi Campbell, the real star of Charles Taylor trial is Griffith's Queen's Counsel." So it really is our distinct pleasure to have him with us today, and we really are looking forward to hearing from you. So, sir, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Today has been a somewhat curious day for me, because guess what? It's International Women's Day. And yet this morning, I spent a couple of hours on a video link with Westminster Magistrates Court in a pre-trial hearing for guess who? A Black female Labour MP who is facing a criminal charge. And today was chosen for a trial which starts next Monday to have a pre-trial hearing in that. What a choice of date. And you see, it reminds me of the concerns which have led me to enter this profession. It was about the racism which I faced as a child growing up in Coventry, in the middle of England, in the 1960s and 70s. And yet, as we all know, last year, George Floyd, a Black man, and we also know quite a few Black women, were murdered by police officers, supposedly implementing the law. And that has led to a lot of global protests about the racism at the heart of his killing in the United States of America. But such racism is not linked solely to the United States of America. It is an aspect of criminal justice globally. Here in the UK, in France, and all over Europe. All European countries, criminal justice system has that same problem at its heart, racism and a gross infliction on Black people. And when looked at globally, criminal justice is racist globally. It's not just a national problem, it's a global problem. The reality being that racism follows the law of gravity. It operates from north to south, from white Europe, white Canada, white USA, all the way down the globe, affecting Black people. And interestingly, in that regard, remember, the primary war crimes court in the world today is the ICC, set up by the Rome Treaty so many years ago. And unsurprisingly, Russia not members, China is not a member, India is not a member. And even though the United States of America decided to sign the Rome Treaty, which established that court, they've now withdrawn. And not surprisingly, guess what? Every single trial conducted at that court today involves African, i.e. Black defendants. Why? And so the point I'm making is this. We shouldn't only be looking and protesting about racism in the United States. We should focus on the way in which criminal justice is conducted globally. Who's in charge of it? Who is mostly affected? It is not limited to the United States. And that global thinking is something which I introduced today because I would like Black female lawyers to start getting involved more internationally. And I'm going to come back to that. Now, I was born in Jamaica in the Caribbean, but moved to the United Kingdom when I was 5 years old on a boat, which sailed around the Caribbean, picking up immigrants, even though we were British citizens, because we were still in their colony. We sailed across the Atlantic to Genoa in northern Italy, where we were placed on a train, which we weren't allowed to get off, for 3 days across northern Italy, across France to Calais, then a ferry to the United Kingdom. And I saw my dad for the first time to recognize him at Charing Cross Station in London, because he left Jamaica and his 8 boys and 1 daughter when I was 10 weeks old. And I was seeing him for the first time to recognize him. And I grew up in Coventry in the Midlands in the United Kingdom. And the reason why I chose to become a barrister, and primarily and almost solely a criminal defense barrister, is because I was subjected, and my family subjected, to racism by the police in Coventry. So that in the middle of the precinct, the shopping centre in the centre of Coventry, there's a small police box the side of a cell. More than once I was drawn in there by police officers who were threatening me, pushing me against a wall, and calling me a nigger and other racist names. That's why I decided to become a barrister. And I've been a criminal defense barrister since 1980, 40 years last year. That's all I've done. I've only ever prosecuted once, even though barristers in the United Kingdom both prosecute and defend. And surprisingly, the only case I've prosecuted involved me prosecuting 9 police officers for the murder of a black man in Birmingham. And guess what? The all-right jury decided to acquit all of them, unsurprisingly. But since then, because of what I've been doing during that time, I've also decided to do a lot more internationally, because at one level, I'm fed up with the United Kingdom. And so as a result, I've done war crimes, as you know, in The Hague defending Charles Taylor and cross-examining Naomi Campbell, as you've mentioned. But interestingly, I've also represented Charles Taylor's second wife at the Old Bailey here in London, equally charged with war crimes. And guess what? Happily, thank God, I managed to gain her acquittal, and she's back in Liberia now. But I've also worked around many islands in the Caribbean, the Cayman Islands, the Turks and Caicos Islands, even in Bermuda as well. And also, interestingly, just before Christmas, I was practicing in South Africa, although I was never called to the bar down there. And guess who I was representing? I was representing one of the most senior judges in South Africa, who's the judge president of the Supreme Court in Cape Town. And the reason why I was asked to go out there and defend him is because the equivalent of QCs in South Africa didn't want to defend him. You know why? The 2 main witnesses against him were 2 of the Constitutional Court judges, the highest court in South Africa. And I had to cross-examine them live on TV just before Christmas. And I enjoyed it because it was such a difference. And even though I started at the bar all that way back, when I started all those years ago, there weren't many women at the bar in the United Kingdom. When I became a barrister and was called to the bar back then, there were between about 20 and 30 Black people practicing at the bar in the UK. All of them were involved in criminal work. Of those, only 1 was a Black female. And yet, times have changed. Nowadays, coming to the bar, because remember, the legal profession here in the UK is split into solicitors and barristers, and solicitors instruct barristers. That's not really always the case nowadays, because a lot of solicitors now can become advocates. And yet, times have changed. The reason being, nowadays, almost 50% of those being called to the bar in the UK are female. And they tend, most of those who succeed, to either study at Oxford or Cambridge or University College, the London School of Economics, where I trained and did my law degree, and King's College, because they're all very proximate to the Inns of Court and the chambers from which barristers practice in London. So they're able to establish friendships and contacts in a way in which other people can't. And yet, funnily enough, I also, they call me Dr. Courtney Griffiths now. I've actually got 4 doctorates, and yet I've never studied to become a doctor. You know why I've got 4 of them? Because over the last, I'd say 15 years or so, I've been doing a lot of lectures in law departments in the UK, in the United States, in the Caribbean, and also in South Africa. And the funny thing I've found is this: in most of those law departments, the majority of the Black people you meet are Black females, not Black males. And that's why there's more Black women qualifying as barristers and practicing in the UK than Black men. And yet, interestingly, when I've attended all these law departments around the world, one of the primary things that I say in my lecture, because they mostly ask me to come and speak to students joining in the first year, one of the biggest things I say is that the biggest mistake I made in my life was studying law at university. And guess why? Because the law I studied at the London School of Economics, I have never used. Land law, trust law, contract law. I've been a criminal defense lawyer for the last 40 years. So none of that have I required. All that I do now, I've picked up during my experience doing that kind of work. That's how you learn advocacy. You're not taught that in most of these law departments. You pick it up as you're going along. And I wish now that I'd done something more interesting, like history at university, then done the 1-year diploma, which puts you in the same position as someone who's done a 3-year law degree. And I wish I hadn't made that mistake. And as I mentioned, and it's one of the points I'm seeking to make, here in the UK, in most of the law departments, when you see a black face, it's primarily Black females. Black young men aren't doing as well. And there are a number of reasons for that. Because in contrast, over the last 30 years, I've spent all my time primarily at the Central Criminal Court, the Old Bailey. There are 18 courts at the Old Bailey. And on any given day, if you were to tour those courts, you'd find that at least 15 involved the trial of Black males aged 14 to 25, primarily charged with murder. And in most of those cases, there are at least 3, sometimes as many as 15 defendants involved facing the same charge based on joint enterprise. And frankly, I'll be honest with you, I'm fed up with having done that back to back for the last 30 years. And in many of those cases, I'd make my closing speech on a Friday, say. My junior would remain for the verdict. Why? Because I was starting another one of those murder trials on the Monday in the same court, back to back for 30 years. And I'm fed up with it now. And that's why now I'm thinking more of working internationally. And I'm thinking also of forgetting criminal law and going into, guess what, arbitration. And it's not just because I've heard people discussing that today. I've been thinking about it for a while. And I've even got, look, the textbooks to teach myself what to do. All right? And so it's something which I think in a context like this, all of us should be discussing. Because I don't think the practice of law anymore should be limited to the country in which you grew up and where you've been practicing. It ought to be extended globally, because where I started was that the issues arising from George Floyd have injected a certain global interest in racism and the criminal justice system. But I think what we ought to be facing needs to be extended beyond that. There are a number of areas like arbitration where firms from white countries have tried to rip off cases in Africa, companies in Africa, companies in the Caribbean. That too has to be addressed. Because once again, that racism inherited from colonialism is affecting the practice of law globally. So it's not about limiting yourself to the country in which you grew up. You need to be thinking about how that issue can be challenged globally, widening our focus beyond just criminal justice and international crime, but the way in which economies are occupied and operating around the globe. And I think a lot more Black females ought to be engaging in their practice in that way internationally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Courtney Griffith, QC. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We have lots of questions for you, but that will be shortly during the Q&A session. So to open up the floor for the attendees, if you have any question, could you please send it through to the Q&A box and we'll address it accordingly. But meanwhile, within the panel, have you got any question at all for any one of the speakers? Any question? I'll start with Courtney. I have a question for you, Dr. Courtney Griffith. My question for you was, in the 60s or in the 70s, when you 80s, when you qualified as a barrister, and you said you had only 30 female lawyers as barristers, what would you say? One
at that time out of the 20 to 30 Black people who were at the bar then.
Only one female barrister in the
Yes.
80s. Seriously? Okay.
It was in 1980.
1980. Okay, thanks for that. Okay.
And even white females back then were not, there weren't many of them at the bar.
Yeah.
At that time, for about 10 years, there was only one white female QC operating at the Bailey. Even though I was there all the time, I didn't see any others back then. Times have changed though.
So from your own point of view, what would you say is the difference between then and now? I would imagine you probably think it's much better now as opposed to then in the 80s. with the number of female barristers, female lawyers, and all that?
Well, I think there have been changes, right? And in terms of who's at the bar practicing now, it has changed quite considerably. But it hasn't changed completely. So as a result, you find that in areas like criminal law, family law, you see a lot more female barristers. But when it comes to the commercial section, where the serious money is made, it's not quite the same. And there's similar changes in terms of the police, because back then in the 1980s, most of the criminal trials were based on lying police officers, saying that defendants, particularly Black defendants, had made admissions and confessions to them at the time. That stopped, because nowadays in criminal trials at the Old Bailey, and indeed throughout the country, sometimes you can do a murder trial and there isn't a single eyewitness. Why? Because the case is based on CCTV, because everywhere you walk in cities around the UK now, you're captured on CCTV. Then it's your mobile phone evidence. And then it's the ANPR, which tracks the way your car drove. Then it's the DNC. And as a result, the kind of cross-examination you did back in the day, nowadays, you hardly have a chance to do it. The most difficult part is when the defendant goes into the witness box to explain what he was doing throughout all that technical evidence. That's the problem now.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. Thank you. Any other question from anyone?
I do have a just sort of a thought and a comment. First of all, so much appreciate all of the discussions of the panelists, and I reflect on where things are here in the US. When I was in law school in 1984 to 87, they thought it was revolutionary for there to be 45% of my class had women. They said that was revolutionary and it never happened. They didn't know if it was a fluke. And now in law schools here, the law schools are populated more by women than men. And as it relates to Black women and Black men, it's something like, for every 2 Black men, there are 10 Black women. So there's a disproportion. So we see here in law schools graduating more Black women every single day, exactly. more and more. So there's similar trends. Now, when it comes to commercial law and all that kind of stuff where the money is, like we were saying, we see something similar with corporate and commercial law here. When we look at Black partners, they're still in majority firms, there's still a huge disparity between men and women in terms of the number of Black women partners. And we look at those issues and those questions all the time. I think it'd be an interesting discussion to talk about it globally, what's happening, because as you said, what's happening here is happening in London, is happening in Paris, is happening all over with trends. I think it's just trends in jurisprudence, no matter where we are. But we see there are some law schools that have very few Black men, very few. And it's disturbing in aspects, because you're wondering what do we account for that trend? And that discussion brings in a bunch of socioeconomic and other issues that we could comment on here in the United States. I don't know if it's the same in the UK or in other countries, but in the US, it brings in a lot of other issues as to why we have less Black men graduating from college and going on to graduate school.
Can I come in here, Onyema, just to bring some African perspective to this discussion? In quite a number of African jurisdictions, we do have almost parity between males and females. I think we also then need to go back to communities or societies that have more female children as against male children. And so if I take Nigeria, for example, or take Ghana, in some years you would have more females in university, in the law school, and than men. But so entering the profession, we still have sort of that sort of statistics where you get almost either parity of men and women, or you get more women. But by the time you get to senior associates and you start hitting the partner levels, things begin to tell a similar story to what you have in the US and what you have in the UK. I'm very conscious of the fact that Chinasa is on the call, and she's already told us about her law firm. But her law firm is not representative of what the major law firms are like across the continent. You still have more male partners than female partners. I think we should remember what Chinasa said, that her law firm made a conscious effort to attain that parity. I think that's what we're asking for, is making that conscious effort and actually doing something to ensure that that parity is maintained.
Can I mention something else on that issue?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
A lot of the Black students who I meet, their parents or themselves originated from Africa, like you, Onyema, okay? And what I'm saying to a lot of them now is, think about returning to Africa. And you know why? Have you noticed how many major white law firms from Europe and from America are now trying to set up, companies, part of the company in Africa? Why do you think they want to do that? It's to make money became a damn thing funny. And so that's why I think a lot more should be thinking of using these companies, joining city firms, and then getting sent out to Africa, back to Africa.
I agree.
Very good point. We've actually run out of time, and a couple of people will need to leave. So I just need your closing remarks as we close up the session. So I would want to hear from the keynote speaker, your closing remarks, and we'll take it from there. Every other person, your closing remarks. 2 minutes, please. No, 5 seconds, please. 5 seconds closing remarks.
Just to say it's been a wonderful, wonderful session. And thanks to all my co-panelists. Thanks for the views you've brought. I think there's a lot to take away. The last thing I would say is that Courtney Griffiths QC, I'd be very, very happy to teach you arbitration.
And I'll be glad to learn.
I like that. I love that. International Women's Day. That's a good one. That's a good one. CK, please, your 2 minutes closing remarks.
Yes, I would. This has been phenomenal, tremendous. We're having a conference in May. I put it in the chat on May 21st or 22nd. I would love for you all to join our conference, to be panelists, to continue this discussion, because this discussion, this perspective that you bring is so essential to social justice in our country and the fight for civil rights. And it's so important for people in my bar and throughout the world to see this talent and the diaspora. That's critical. So I would love if you all could join. Thank you for involving me. And just remember, a luta continua.
A luta continua, I like that. Taffy, please.
It's been an absolutely amazing experience to join you all today. And I would just say to all the listeners, panelists, continue to challenge. Let's start today. Whatever it is you think you could do better, start today. No time like the present. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Taffy, please.
Yeah, I have to just add my thanks to you, Onyema and Mohammed, for this wonderful discussion and the variety of views on this important issue. I feel I've been given a lot to think about, and it's been amazing to be with all of you and just take the moment as we are celebrating women to think about to thank all the women who've helped us, each of us, be where we are today, because there are many and we couldn't name them all, but we are each grateful to them. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Chinasa, please.
I want to thank you, Onyema. Thank you, Mohammed, for reaching out to me to be a part of this. It's been a privilege. And I want to thank all the panelists as well. I almost didn't want to speak. I just wanted to sit and soak up all you were saying. I look forward to other opportunities to interact again and learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And last but not the least, Dr. Courtney Griffith, QC, please. Your closing remarks. 2 minutes, please.
It was such a pleasure listening to so many people from around the world addressing issues which have concerned me for many, many years, and particularly at my age, to appreciate now that younger people than myself are thinking in the same way just gives me so much pleasure, and I'm so glad. And hope to maintain this contact so we can continue this exchange over the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Mohammed, any closing remarks? Mohammed, please.
Oh, not at all. Just to thank you all very much for your time and for joining us today to celebrate International Women's Day. It really was a privilege for us at the Africa Interest Group at the American Society of International Law. Just thank you so much for everyone who's attended and for all the panelists for your time. We are really deeply grateful to you all. And of course, thank you to my dearest friend, Onyema, for all her effort in, as usual, orchestrating this fabulous panel.
Thank you. On this note, I say a very big thank you to everyone, to our IT help assistant, James Tanner. Thank you very much for the assistance. Thank you for all the help. Thank you to all the panelists, the keynote speaker, Professor Emilia, Onyema, to Ck Hoffler, to Taffy, to Simon, to Chinasa, to everyone. Thank you very much. I really appreciate from my heart. Mohammed, thank you too. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a wonderful evening and bye.